Welcome to Financial Issues, where we join reality with truth, helping you make the most of your money by honoring God with your investments. Now listen in as we give you the practical tools and advice you need to become a biblically responsible investor.
Welcome to Financial Issues. I'm your host, Shana. Thanks for tuning in today. Financial Issues is a ministry, and our main goal is to educate, edify, and encourage people in the ways of stewardship from the scriptures, with a biblical worldview. We hope that you're a partner with us. If you're not, please consider becoming one. It's just $132 a year, and you'll get access to our biblically responsible investment strategy, which is a way that we help you honor the Lord by screening companies out of your portfolio that are maybe contributing to the darkness of this world. So using shareholder money to support things like abortion and pornography, the LGBTQ agenda, human rights violations, and so many other things that we do not want to be yoked with. So if you're interested in cleaning up your portfolio and showing God that you honor Him by keeping His stuff out of funding these causes, then consider partnering with us. On today's show, we're going to answer some of your questions. We're going to talk to Jason MacDowell. We're going to bring Jason MacDowell in just a little bit, and we're going to be discussing the housing market, home ownership, how that relates to, biblical marriage and the things that we are called to do in the natural progression of as we live our lives. We leave our parents, we become one with our spouse, we start families, and there's this issue of home ownership that's always been the American dream that is a little bit further out of reach for younger people today. So you're not going to want to miss it. Stay tuned. We've got Jason coming on just a little bit to talk about those things, and we're going to get encouragement from the scripture. We're going to talk about stewardship as we look at Psalm 91, 1 and 2. It says, "He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God, in whom I will trust." What do you think, Seth?
Well, Shana, I picked this verse knowing what you and Jason are going to talk about later in the show, mortgages, housing, things like that. But, it got me to thinking, do we think often enough about where we truly dwell? And by truly dwell, I mean where we spiritually dwell. From a spiritual perspective, do we dwell with God or not? And those who trust in God for salvation, the Bible tells us, dwell with Him and in Him. He's our true home. He's our protection, our fortress. Much the same way, Shana, that Noah and his family were inside the ark, and that's what protected them from God's wrath. When we trust in Christ for our salvation, we are in Christ. We're protected from the wrath of God in Christ. We dwell with Him. So I hope that we'll do that today and every day by drawing near to God. And we do that first and foremost in salvation, but then it's also a continual drawing near to Him where daily, every day, we grow more and more like Him. I hope that every listener will consider doing that today.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we think about those concepts of where we live and stewardship and how that's all connected, as Christians, whenever we make a profession of faith, we make Jesus the Lord of our life. Well, Jesus should also be the master of our homes as well, our physical homes. And so, I'm always thinking about how do we connect the things that we're learning in the scripture with our everyday life. And, I'm in the process of building a house right now. And, it's a bigger house, and we're going to have plenty of room. And I've been thinking about and praying about, Lord, thanking the Lord for the provision that He's given me and my family, and then asking Him too, Lord, how do you want me to use this house? Like, hospitality is a gift, a gift that some Christians have more than others. But, how do we use everything that we've been given by God for His glory, to bring glory to Him? And so I've been thinking about that, and I'm praying about that. I've been, thinking about hosting Bible studies in my home, and, my kids are teenagers right now. So, thinking of my home as being a refuge and a fortress, because kids are going through a lot these days. And so I want my kids to be able to invite their friends over. I want them to like to hang out at our house, and I want them to know that Jesus is the master of our house. And, maybe they'll feel comfortable. Maybe they'll feel like that's a refuge for them and a place where they can safely, approach somebody about the issues of life, knowing that we'll be able to give them a godly answer and be able to point them to Jesus. So, that's just one way that we can connect that. And I would encourage you too to ask the Lord, if you are blessed to be a homeowner, how does God want you to use your house? You would probably be amazed at some of the creative ways that God would have us to use the stuff that we are managing.
Great, Shana.
All right.
Now we do have some questions here. You want to get some of these?
Okay. Yeah.
Let's do it. Mark is up first. He's 63. He says, Shana, I'm looking to open a donor-advised fund to manage my IRMA bracket for when I turn 65. I currently use the Schwab and Timothy platforms. Is there an option to be biblically responsible with the investments in the DAF? I manage my own portfolio because of FISM, and you all are such a blessing. Thank you. Mark, you're a blessing to us, man. Thank you. What would you have for him, Shana? What do you think?
Yeah. So, there are two that I use in my practice that does allow for self-management. Now, I don't know if that's on the individual level or just because I'm an investment professional, but Waterstone and Wren Trust are two that I found freedom to self-direct and be able to choose investments. I know that there was a certain DAF that was mentioned on this, even on this show not long ago with the National Christian Foundation, and we've been doing some due diligence on them, but they really don't offer a way for biblically responsible investing. So for me right now, they are off my radar as a possibility of using them for a DAF. So I would just say check around, ask all the right questions. That's one of the questions that you want to ask for sure is, because the way that a donor advised fund works is that you're making an irrevocable gift into a trust. So you're transferring ownership to the donor advised fund custodian and the trust, the way that they manage it. And then you can offer advice on how the money is managed. You can offer advice on how the money is distributed, but there has to be that arm's length worth of distance between the two, and because you do get a tax benefit whenever you gift stock or money into a donor advised fund. So the new custodian can reject the advice that you offer them about where to give the money or how to manage the money. So you want to ask those questions up front about what their policies are, about how the money is managed. A lot of times they'll if they don't allow self-management, then they will tell you, give you some options about where the money is invested, and then you can use our screening tool to see if those things are biblically responsible. You also want to ask questions about any kind of gifts that or any kind of grants that they might reject. So I know that there were some of the big ones. We were hearing reports that, donors were recommending gifts to certain organizations. Certain organizations were on a list, kind of a blacklist of companies that were considered to be hate organizations because they believe what the Bible says and they were interested in doing what the Bible says. And they were not allowing gifts to those certain organizations if they were found on that list. So you want to ask all of those good questions as you're considering a donor advised fund.
Good stuff, Shannon. Blair's up next. Blair's 67, plans to work for the next 1 to 2 years, currently in the growth and income model, and just started Social Security when I hit full retirement. He says, I'll have a nice core pension plan when I retire. However, I'd like for retirement savings to provide about 40 to 50% of monthly income. So I have two questions. First, is it wise for me to stay in the growth and income model for now? And second, I'm underweight in fixed income. Can I split between FX68 and FX55? I prefer no CDs at this time. What do you think?
Yep. So the first question, is it appropriate to stay in the growth and income model? I will say probably. So I can't say specifically for you because I don't know all of the details surrounding your situation, but the fact that you say you're 67, you're retiring, you're going to start drawing some income. I don't know what your risk tolerance looks like. You have some other income. the growth and income model, and if you go on our website and read the descriptions for, what they're designed to do and how they're designed to work, I think you'll have a good idea if it's right for you. But, some of the information that you give seems to check a lot of boxes that says that it's something good that you can consider. And then as far as the 2 fixed income that you mentioned, I much prefer FX 55 over FX 68. I think I'd use 55. Not sure why you don't want CDs at this time, but they can't offer good rates. We tend to gravitate towards fixed income investments that are not going to fluctuate a whole lot in value. So, all right, folks, I hear the music. That means we got to go. But we're just going to take a break. We're going to be back after the break, and I'll have my friend Jason MacDowell come back on, and we're going to be talking about housing, marriage, the American dream, all of those good things. So stick around. We'll be back.
There are moments in life that define us. Choices determine the courses we take. Choices that create life, or those that save a life. And some make life worthwhile. There are decisions to stay or to go, to remain the same or to grow. Sometimes we pray and make peace. Other times we take a stand for what we believe. In celebration, mourning, triumph, and defeat, we are invested in every decision we seek. Despite differences, we have one thing in common: the desire to do all for the glory of God. Keep your wallet aligned with your heart and your investments in harmony with your faith. Timothy Plan, biblically responsible mutual funds, ETFs, and retirement plans. Before investing, carefully consider a fund's investment objective, risks, charges, and expenses contained in the prospectus available at timothyplan.com. Read carefully before investing.
When we seek to honor God first in everything that we do, we can trust God that He's going to give us a level of success, whether that means success as we measure them in our earthly portfolios or eternal rewards.
Just wanted to say I'm a very happy 7-year partner. It's been a great ride.
My wife and I are partners, and we really appreciate your ministry.
A lot of things that y'all have added to my financial peace.
Go to financialissues.org to get started today.
If a woman sees her baby on ultrasound, it doubles the likelihood that she'll choose life. On top of that, we share the gospel of Jesus Christ with her. This is why you should support preborn.
Then they sat me down. If you were to die today, do you think you would go to heaven? And I was like, no. Keeping the child was my first stepping stone. And ever since then, God has cleaned me up from the inside out.
Help support women in need. Go to preborn.com/FISM.
Securities offered through G.A. Reppel & Company, a registered broker-dealer and investment advisor, member FINRA and SIPC. Opinions expressed by Shana are hers alone and are for informational purposes only and do not necessarily represent those of G.A. Reppel or the outlet on which you are listening. You should consider how the information applies to your situation prior to personally implementing it and consult any financial professional you work with to make sure it's applicable to your financial plan.
Welcome back to Financial Issues. Thanks for sticking with us for the second segment of the show today. So I've got my friend and colleague, Jason MacDowell, back, and we're going to talk about home ownership. Home ownership is the American dream, or part of the American dream, right? It's everybody's desire to own a home. It represents independence. It represents the opportunity for wealth building. I remember I bought my first home when I was 22 years old when I got married, and home ownership has historically gone hand in hand with things like marriage. A man leaves his family and cleaves to his wife, and they start their own family. And, you got to have some place to live when you do that. So starting a family, and then home ownership also contributes to building generational wealth. We often see that people have a good portion of their net worth in their home, even as they age and get into the retirement years. But today's economic landscape is shifting very dramatically, and not necessarily in a good way when it comes to that American dream of home ownerships. The statistics tell us that the first-time home buyer looks much different today than it did in my day. Gosh, you're getting old when you start saying in my day. But, and for the 20-something-year-old, buying a starter home has become somewhat of a pipe dream. So, Jason, welcome back. Thanks for being here today. I'm hoping you'll share some of your own experiences. I shared mine. And, we're diving into a conversation that connects housing, marriage, federal policy, and a potential war on the Fed all in one segment. How we get from here to there by the end of this segment is going to be a mystery to me, but let's try to do it. Home prices have increased around 50% since pre-COVID, and we're seeing record home prices in some areas of the country. So, talk a little bit about who's buying, what does that first-time home buyer look like, so on and so forth.
Yeah, so who is buying in this housing market? Well, June home prices have hit an all-time high since, just for a long time here. But this has mattered for most of the U.S. About 2/3 of the U.S. are seeing these home prices rapidly increase, but it depends on your area. You can see some home prices actually plummeting. So that other third there really all depends on the demand, right? And then of course that supply backs to simple economics. The average home buyer is actually now 56 years old, but this isn't to purchase their first home. This is actually to purchase an additional home that they're not spending time in. So these are infrequent. So first-time home buyers are now averaging just 38 years old. I turned 38 in September of this year, so I'm adding to the statistic here. Maybe, Lord willing. But I'm holding out for my own personal reasons. There's a lot of other things I might include. But right now, buyers need to have about $127,000 to afford the average home. And we're going to look at this as more so, how much are you actually putting down? Probably the bare minimum. Maybe you have a mediocre credit score. There's some other things that take place there. But this number is actually up from $79,000 to afford the median home price just 4 years ago. Yeah. So we're seeing a change there. So last month, about 15% of pending contracts were actually canceled, which was thought to be caused by insurance premiums, so homeowner insurance, and surprise inspections that most likely were not going well. And of course, there was volatility with the rates with the mortgage, of course. We're in a volatile situation right now. We don't know what the Fed's going to do. And so there's some obvious cases for things like that.
Yeah, that's true. I wonder how much of it is in appraisals too, and how home prices are coming back. There's a lot of things that go into that. But let's talk about the wealth building aspect. So according to the Fed, the median net worth of a home buyer is over $400,000 compared to people who rent with a net worth of about $10,000. And the deck really seems to be stacked against young people with higher mortgage rates and bloated home prices and not enough homes to buy. Yet, the competition in the housing market is fierce. Decades of cheap money have enticed many to become landlords. Not only, I have lots of friends that, that really got into buying up a lot of rental properties, but it's not just individuals, right? It's corporations. So talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, so corporations and cheap federal subsidized loans are actually the focus of buyers right now, owning just 1 in 4 rental homes. So they just keep buying those up. So according to one Federal Reserve study, is that the median net worth that you brought up there is that $400,000, while the net worth of a renter is only $10,000. Just repeating exactly what you just said. It makes me question, rent always goes up everywhere I go. And so I've been moving a lot to avoid that, cut down on expenses. I have some flexibilities that others don't. But if rent keeps going up, how are these renters affording all this? So my question is going to be, how involved is the government going to get in this? And that always isn't too good for us as Americans when the government does that to save us.
Yeah, so, the Federal Reserve doesn't control mortgage rates. They control the overnight rates, the overnight lending rates between financial institutions. But, a lot of people think, well, if the Fed would just lower rates, then people could afford homes, mortgage rates would go down, and, everything would be solved. But that's not necessarily true. Mortgage rates stayed high even when the Fed cut rates last year. So, it's the short end of the yield curve that gets impacted when the Fed cuts the most. So, rate cuts might not really be effective for bringing mortgage rates down, but what's another possibility? What else could?
Well, impossible scenario, I'll say. Nothing's technically impossible, but if the Fed sells its $2 trillion in mortgage bonds, that would probably put people on the streets. So that's one area. The Fed cutting rates would be a good thing because that mortgage cost itself could cut up to 15 to 20% of the actual cost. What actually would bring that qualifying income from $127,000 down to $100,000 as a possibility on the good side. That's really hard to do for the young crowd. So we were, just talking about Gen Z, they're in the workforce right now. They're in their 20s. So, graduate college. Hopefully they did get a job and they're not working side jobs that weren't in their field. How are you going to add to that? So the question can be also, what about getting married? Is that a possibility of combining? Now, I'm not saying getting married to go buy a home and just, there's a lot more factors to that biblically. Let's make sure there's qualifications. But, what are we seeing right now with trends? So another one is also just raising income. So the big problem is the young people have lower incomes. And that's also contributed to why they're not getting married. So a survey from Happily Surveys talked about how young people aren't getting married right now because of the stagnant incomes. So if you fix the incomes, you might see more people getting married, but at the same time, it's almost a catch-22. If you combine those two incomes before children, and if the wife isn't staying home for her full-time job of taking care and raising for children, providing for the home that way, then there could be that possibility where they do qualify for these medium home prices, but they're still pretty high as is. So,
yeah, and inventory is still an issue.
Yes.
More homes need to be built. I mean, that's it. A lot of times it comes back to a supply and demand type thing. Small home builders, that's what, my husband does. He's a general contractor, and, small home builders are really at a disadvantage when you compare them to the big corporations, because these big corporations, they can buy down mortgage rates. So they can build the homes, and then they can, they can buy down the mortgage rates, which makes the total purchase more favorable for, the total cost of the purchase more favorable for people who would be buying the homes. And, the issue with that, like you said, it's never a good idea for the government to get involved in the private market, because big home builders, you can't force a company to produce something or to do something when it's going to be detrimental to them. That's just, that's not fair. If you were one of the big home builders, I would suggest that you would say the government can't tell me what to do. They can't make me build more homes if it's going to cost me money or cause me to lose money. I mean, that's just not the American way either. So, and these big home builders, they're in business to make a profit. They're not there to solve for the housing crisis that was, economic crises are a lot of times self-inflicted. I'll just say that. There's also Trump's idea to remove that capital gains tax on home sales. Speak to that.
Yeah, there's administration. This looks like this administration is trying to help. I mean, under Trump, right now, the blue-collar wages have been reported of hitting a 6-year high. Does that count for all the 20-year-olds? I don't know. It's just that particular industry. DOGE has even started on federal regulations, meaning they're looking into that. Could that help with the housing supply? Possibly. They're going to find a lot of probably illegal regulations. And then, of course, they're removing capital gains tax on home sales. So, of course, that's to increase supply, right? That's Trump trying to work on that. And that act is actually in Congress. So do I feel confident that something can get through Congress very quickly after we just had HR 1? Probably not. But the capital gains tax right now, there is a tax exclusion for those that are filing jointly. There's a $500,000 tax exclusion if you file jointly on your first home sale, as long as it was lived in for at least 2 years of the last 5 years. So that's that's opening that up. Only so many people are going to qualify for that. Latest data is the average homeowner has gained about $140,000 in equity over the last 5 years. So that's just not even counting the principal pay down as well. So
I just don't know if that'll go a really long way towards increasing the inventory, because even if they sell their home, they got to buy another one. So it doesn't solve for that inventory problem there. And, I don't think that that's going to be an incentive to get people to sell their homes. I think it would be a different kind of incentive, but it's likely. I mean, it's really the corporations. If they own one out of every 4 homes, what could happen to get them to incentivize them to sell their homes so that people could have more homes to buy and home prices could come back into an achievable range. But like you said, you'll have to get Congress on board for that, and we all know how hard that is, because you'll have those in Congress that'll be screaming, if you try to extend that capital gains exemption to corporations or even individuals that may own 50 rental houses or something like that, you're going to hear all of them screaming about well, that's just helping the rich get richer, and so we know how all of that goes. Well, Jason, thanks for being with me today. It's always a great conversation when you come on.
Always.
And folks, if you're listening on an outlet that only carries the short version of the show, we wish you a farewell. For everyone else, stick around. We've got more financial issues to come right after this break. Find out more about our ministry at financialissues.org.
Most people have no idea what their money is funding. In many cases, they are unknowingly supporting companies that contradict their values. That's why it's so important to know who you're investing in and what they stand for. At Financial Issues, we help Christians invest with biblical values. Our daily live broadcast is completely free and covers the economy, markets, and even politics through a financial lens grounded in a biblical worldview. But we don't stop at just commentary. We equip believers to manage their own portfolios, offering research-backed asset allocation models, biblically responsible stock recommendations, and practical guidance. You manage your money. We do the research. And for what works out to be only $11 a month, you get access to everything you need to invest with conviction. If you're ready to align your faith with your finances, go to financialissues.org. That's financialissues.org.
If you don't get life right, you're not going to get all the other issues correct, period. It is the issue that impacts every other issue. Life is the central part of what keeps this republic together. It is the contract that the founding fathers passed down through multiple generations. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You don't have life, you don't have a republic. There is a temptation out there right now. And I want to just tell you we must resist it. There's this temptation that we cast this issue aside. How does that honor God? It doesn't. And if it wasn't for preborn, I would be super just confused and depressed, because there has never been, in my opinion, a more disjointed time in the pro-life movement. We need a machine to go up against the Planned Parenthood beast. Like, we have to play offense against the pro-abortion forces in this country, okay? We have to play offense. And preborn does it in this compassionate, merciful, godly way that is just so inspiring and amazing.
Welcome back. Financial Issues, folks. Wonderful to be here with you today. I've got a special treat joining me on the show today. My friend Frank Gaffney. Frank is the president of the Institute for the American Future. He's an American patriot, served under the Reagan administration as Reagan's Assistant Secretary of Defense for International Security Policy. Frank is a big believer in the values that made this country great, and he's fighting every day to restore and keep those values. Frank, I appreciate you so much, brother. Thanks for joining me again.
It's a privilege always to be able to do so. Thank you so much for having me, Seth.
Absolutely. So I have several topics lined up for today, brother. The first is this. You shared a statement earlier this week on your Secure Freedom Minute spot on the radio concerning the looming threat of possible taxation from, in my opinion, and I'm sure you probably agree with me, one of the most worthless, evil, garbage organizations in the modern world, that would be the United Nations. Tell us about this. What is this possible tax burden from our benevolent overlords in the UN, and how might it impact U.S. citizens if it indeed is implemented?
Well, let me start by just affirming your very poor estimation of the value of this organization. And it's important to do so, Seth, because it's also important to understand that from its inception, the idea was to be hostile to the United States, to Israel, obviously, when it came along, but also to the I would argue, free world more generally. And it was a predictable upshot of giving, in the General Assembly, an equal vote, single vote, to every member state. And given, what happened with sort of post-colonialism, the spawning of many, many, many states, most of them, again, hostile to freedom, hostile to certainly the developed world. Predictably, we were outvoted, and it became more and more toxic in more and more of its agencies and more of its various, committees and commissions and so on. My point is this, that when you understand that it actually had baked into that hostility the idea that the arrangement that would ultimately arise from all of this would be not just a place where people could get together and cast votes that annoyed us, but rather to create a world government that would essentially rule us as well. And the thing that I'm warning about right now, which I only learned about, a couple of days ago myself, is that for quite some time, the champions of this idea of world government have understood that in order for them to actually pull this off, they needed not only to get certain powers vested in them and, certain arrangements that would establish, a supremacy of this kind of governance, they also needed a revenue stream. And so they began thinking of various ways in which the United Nations could tax the world. And they've come up with one that is now quite far advanced, the first, I think, of its kind, and that is a tax on international shipping, on the grounds that a lot of the ships are dirty and produce lots of diesel exhausts, and that constitutes a threat to the ozone layer, and that in turn creates global warming, and that in turn causes, adverse repercussions, notably for islands in the Pacific that will become, below water level if the seas continue to rise and so on. So the idea is they're going to tax these ships, and the funding that will be generated by it, and I've heard estimates anywhere from $10 billion a year to maybe even $100 billion a year, all of which would by necessity be added to the tax burden or effectively the costs of people using what is shipped. But the point is, this would create a revenue stream that could be used not just for, fighting global warming, a hardy perennial of the UN, but also for funding the organization. In other words, making it independent of the member support that has heretofore been something of a break, particularly ours, since we provide something like a quarter of the total amount that funds the operations of the UN. We've been able to say, hey, no, you're not going to do that, not with our money, and that has to some extent caused them to be a little less aggressive, a little less insidious than they would otherwise be. But this taxing authority, which would become, of course, a precedent for a lot more of it, you can bet, would change that power dynamic very markedly, and I think to the great detriment of, again, not just us, our vital interests, but the free world more generally.
Mm. Frank, thank you for bringing that to our attention, brother. It certainly is concerning stuff for sure. And, you had mentioned in your radio spot the idea, as a historian, I appreciate this so much, that we have seen this before. We as a nation once fought a war for our independence over this very concept, taxation without representation. Back then, we fought against the global power. Now it seems we're also fighting against the global power, or are we? And that's really my next question for you. Do we have the same type of people that we had in the 1770s, the founding fathers, courageous men who were willing to say, we're not standing for this. We're not going to allow our people to be taxed by some evil world-ruling cabal. Do we have that now?
It's a great question, Seth. I believe that the Trump administration has communicated that it does not support what's going on here. And certainly, to his credit, the president has said, we're getting out of the World Health Organization. One of the other vanguards of this effort to push forward the agenda of global government. But, at the end of the day, our founding fathers put on the line their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor to fight that global power. And some of them paid in all three categories, by the way. Others survived and led us into the promised land of independence from Great Britain, a great power at the time. But I don't know that revolutionary efforts are going to be required, but I can tell you it is going to take a very strong resistance to it. And maybe ultimately, some would argue, the departure of the United States from the UN itself in order to make sure that we are not stuck with the consequences of all of this. I confess I have some mixed feelings about that, because I think the UN would go on to do even worse stuff if we were not there. Not in the General Assembly, that's going to go on as it has, where we get outvoted, but on the Security Council, which is the outfit that has the real teeth, if we're not there to cast a veto, you can bet an awful lot of even worse things will happen. But that's where the rubber's going to meet the road, is how much are we going to do to resist this and prevent it if we can.
So well said, brother. I know I've asked you a similar question to this before in previous interviews, but if you had the president's ear, what would you tell President Trump to do?
First of all, I think he needs to bring this to the attention of the American people.
Yeah.
The whole issue of global governance, by the way, is something that most of us have no idea is even afoot, let alone what threat it would represent. We started, as you know, Seth, a group we call the Sovereignty Coalition for the purposes of raising awareness about it and pushing back against it, particularly in connection with this World Health Organization effort to give an unelected, unaccountable bureaucrat the ability to tell us when we have a public health emergency of international concern, and worse, what we must do about it. And we had a taste of that with the COVID-19 exercise, as you know, and he didn't have that authority then, but it kind of worked out that way, and it was a disaster. Yeah. The American people remember, I think most of us, there's an old line about a conservative is a liberal mugged by reality. I think a lot of us were mugged by the reality of the abuses that flowed from the World Health Organization, prescribing what we were supposed to do about COVID. We need to translate that abiding resentment into active opposition to any other form of government that is going to substitute for ours, our constitutional republic, our representative form of government. That's what's on the line.
Frank, I appreciate your insight into this so much. Unfortunately, we're just about out of time here. But real quickly, tell our listeners, where can they learn more about this topic and some of the other things that you're keeping an eye on right now?
Well, a kind of one-stop shop is our Institute for the American Future website, and that is usfuture.org. Pretty easy to remember. Yep. That will give you access to all of our various coalitions that we called our Special Forces in the War of Ideas, and we welcome their interest and their support, if possible. usfuture.org.
Frank, we appreciate you so much, brother. That's Frank Gaffney, folks. I appreciate the work that he does. Always a joy to have him on the show. Looking forward to the next time that we do it. We got more financial issues right on the other side of this break. You're not going to want to miss it. Stick with us.
It's up to us to stand up and say, enough is enough. All of this unbiblical stuff that's going on, whether it's abortion or transsexual or LGBTQ, widespread pornography, human trafficking. Bottom line, it's still up to us. If we stop investing in these corporations that are trying to destroy us, sooner or later they're going to wake up.
To learn more about biblically responsible mutual funds and ETFs, go to timothyplan.com.
Where's Mima? We found out Shepard's diagnosis when I was about 17 weeks pregnant. We learned that he was going to need a series of surgeries after he was born in order to give him what they considered a normal life. And we weren't sure how this worked.
Yeah, very emotional, very, very broken. And as my wife just said, not sure how this worked. And called Samaritan, and they said, you just go have that baby. You leave the rest to us.
And just to hear the confidence on the other end of the phone of this is not something that you need to be concerned about at all. You focus on the health of your family, the health of your baby, and we will walk with you every step of the way.
If a woman sees her baby on ultrasound, it doubles the likelihood that she'll choose life. And on top of that, we share the gospel of Jesus Christ with her. This is why you should support preborn. The donations that you give actually make a difference. Last year, 59,000 babies were saved because of what you have done with your generosity.
To find out how you can support the life-saving mission of preborn, go to preborn.com/FISM.
The opinions and recommendations expressed on this program do not necessarily represent the opinions of the station or any of the program sponsors. Additionally, all products or services offered by the program sponsors may not be known by the program.
Been a good show, folks. Appreciate you all joining us. Been a busy one. It's good to have Jason, Frank, Shana, the whole kit and caboodle, as they say, Sam, on the program today.
The gang's all here.
That's right. We're having some fun. Speaking of the gang, we always appreciate so much your comments and questions, folks. And boy, we got a good one here. Sam, why don't you read us Bill's question here? What do we got from Bill?
Well, this is could be controversial depending on how you read it. Bill says, if anyone there is interested, that is on the chat, he said, I'm using XAI to supplement your buy list, and so far it seems to be working quite well. So the future is now,
The future is now, Sam. That's exactly right. Chat, share your thoughts with us. We'd love to hear this. Bill, while the chat's doing that, I'll share my thoughts with you. I appreciate you sharing, and I appreciate you giving us this information. Let me say a few things about this. First, your approach, Bill, is not uncommon. There are a growing number of Americans who are using AI to help with their investments. Sam, give us that study that you found from March. What's the number of Americans that are now starting to do this? And this is according to March, so we assume the number might even be higher by this point.
Yeah, so that study found that about 47% of Americans, so about half of the people in the United States, now say they feel pretty comfortable using AI to help with their investments and finances. So that means various things. It doesn't mean everyone's using it for investing purposes, but I think most people from that study are at least using it for budgeting at this point.
Yeah. So it seems to be the trend as AI becomes more popular, which it will. It will become more popular. The practice is going to become more mainstream. So let me say this as well, Bill. You know, the FISM strategy really is a do-it-yourself strategy. That's one of the beauties of it, I think. Maybe the thing that I enjoy most about it, other than that it's God glorifying, it's do-it-yourself. That means anyone can do it. Regular guys and gals like you and I can do it. And we can also use supplementary tools that we feel could help us. So you can do stuff like this. You can use AI to supplement your research. I think that's cool. I also think there's nothing objectively wrong about using AI to supplement your research when you're doing this or anything. I think we can get into the weeds a little bit and we can start to talk about, when it would be wrong to do that. But it doesn't go against BRI principles. I don't think it's necessarily sinful to use AI to help with your research. So, and I'm glad it's working well for you so far too.
Yeah, I guess the question is, what does supplement mean here? A great example of where it might be helpful, but you have to be careful because AI does get things wrong, would be, let's say you have two similar stocks on the buy list and they're in the same sector. They also do similar things, and you want to know which one's right for me. I want to know what they do. I want to make an informed decision. So AI might be useful in that situation just to give you a little bit more information.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think that's a great way to do it. So that's my first comment for you, Bill. Now let me give you the other side of this, okay? Personally, I would avoid it. I personally would avoid it. And again, an opinion show. I get paid to share my opinions. Here's my opinion for what you're doing. I don't think it's a good idea. And I say this with all love, absolutely. Also understanding what Sam said, that we don't have a clear understanding of how you're doing this, but assuming that it's what we think it is. This is not a sin versus not sin issue, by the way.
Can you explain what you think it is?
I can. Yeah. So, Bill, based on the way you phrased your question, using AI to supplement your buy list is that somehow you're using AI to look for companies that could qualify as BRI. So maybe you are looking for additional companies that we might not have on our buy list. That's what I'm getting from your question.
And that's how I read it too. I phrased my alternative as a potential of what he also means. Bill, if this isn't what you mean, if you're not adding to the buy list, let us know.
Please
but for our conversation right now, we're going to assume that's what you mean.
Yep, we're going off of what you said. And so if that's what it is, I personally would avoid it. Not because it's sinful, but I think because it might not be the wisest thing to do. Let me explain a couple reasons. Reason number one, and this is by far the most important, we tried that. So Sam and I did an experiment late last week where we put Grok to the test, asked it questions about BRI investing, and it failed the test. Sam, tell Bill and the rest of our listeners what happened when you asked Grok AI to give us biblically responsible companies to invest in. What did it spit out?
So I asked our robot overlords, Grok, what are the best biblically responsible stocks out there? And to be fair to Grok, it actually gave a pretty good definition of BRI itself. It says it focuses on aligning investment with Christian values. It wants to avoid things like abortion, pornography, gambling, etc. So that's a pretty good definition, a pretty good working definition.
Definitely.
My question, though, overall, it failed because I said, what are the best BRI stocks? It gave a couple good ones, and then it really goes off the rails because it says Walmart. Our friends over at Walmart, that is not a good BRI stock. They sell porn at their store. They donate to abortion and LGBT causes, but it thinks that it might be BRI because it does have Christian roots. Sam Walton, the founder, was a Christian.
That's right.
It also says Tyson Foods would be a good BRI stock because it has a faith-friendly corporate culture. But again, it also donates to LGBT causes. Many more companies like this, Alaska Air Group and JetBlue, both not BRI, and even Marriott Hotels, which which runs casinos, also supports those abortion and LGBT causes too.
Sam, thanks for bringing that up. So it seems like Grok got some things right, but got some things really badly wrong. And I think across the board, it kind of seemed to fall into what many people think BRI investing is, which is just as long as the company has Christian roots, it's fine. We know that's not what biblically responsible investing is. It's what a company explicitly does with shareholder dollars. And if those shareholder dollars are being used to fund things that God hates, that company is not biblically responsible. Even if it's started and founded and run by Christians, it's not biblically responsible. So definitionally, Grok does not understand what it truly means to be BRI, at least according to our experiment. Bill, for that reason alone, that's why I would tell you I would avoid it, is because I don't think Grok is trustworthy to understand what BRI truly is.
Yeah, and actually it was pulling a lot of this information from an article from 2014, so that's just not quite up to date data. So maybe it was right about some of these companies. Maybe Tyson, I can't remember if it was or wasn't BRI at the time. I'm almost positive that Tyson was at that point, because I know Tyson was on our list at one point, Sam, and maybe Walmart too. At that point. So it could just be pulling from bad data. But again, that just shows you really can't trust it for these types of things. Absolutely. So that'd be reason number one, Bill. I think that's most important. I'll give you a few more. Reason number two, I generally distrust AI as a whole. Please don't hear me say this, folks, that AI is bad. I don't think it's bad at all. I think it can be used for great things. I think it also can be used for very bad things. It's like I use it for spell check just about every day. That's exactly right. It's great to be used for spell check. Probably not the best thing to do if you're a pastor and you're trying to write a sermon. Might not be the best thing to do. In the same way that I trust a trained pilot to land a plane more than I would trust a robot to land a plane in a storm, it's the same idea. Or if I'm having major surgery, I would like a skilled surgeon. I would not like a robot. I want a skilled surgeon with human intellect making those decisions. Same idea. There's something to be said for human intuition, God-given intellect. Those things cannot be replicated. I don't care how smart the robot is. You cannot create God-given intellect in a machine. That is something only God can create, and it's only created in mankind because we reflect the image of God. He has that intellect in perfection. We have it in imperfection because we've been marred by the fall, but we still have it. These machines cannot have that. So there's a general distrust for AI for me as well. And then reason number three is based off reason number two. I specifically distrust AI based on the fact that it will naturally reflect the worldview of whoever creates it. So what you have to look at with Grok, for example, is Grok will reflect its creators. ChatGPT will reflect its creators. All these other ones, I don't know what, Gemini is another one, I think, Sam, that will reflect its creators. Was Gemini the one that when it first came out, people were asking it to make AI images of the founding fathers, and it made some black guys, not some white guys? It rewrote history because its creators were woke, right? And so we've seen this in the recent past. I mean, this is something that's happened with several different AI bots. Sam, you mentioned one of them. Several of them are pre-programmed to think and react negatively to the Christian worldview. And I personally wouldn't get involved with it for that way. That's me merely using my God-given intellect as well. AI, we think about it on a base level. We would hope that it would just be an unbiased robot. It's really not. There actually is no such thing, because there's always biases from the creators. We create things with biases. My favorite AI robot, truthfully, would be one that's biased toward Christianity. I wouldn't mind that at all. I think there's some Catholic group that has one out there right now. I kind of want to try it to see how it works. That might be a better AI. What it's called, though. Truthfully, they said it was like if you baptize ChatGPT. So I'm kind of curious. Yeah, absolutely. It certainly won't be perfect, but it might be better. None of these things are unbiased because they were created by sinful humans with sinful agendas. So I think that's really important, something to be aware of. And as far as the market goes, there's a level of irrationality in human behavior, especially at very large scale. I mean, if you paid attention to the show, the market is pretty jumpy at times, and sometimes for pretty silly reasons. And I'm just not sure if a robot can pick up on that subtle human irrationality, that behavior that you can't always calculate out why people are doing things and what's going to happen down the line. That seems like something you need a person who actually understands human beings to work with that data. Sam, you're touching on a topic that our founder, Dan Celia, was an expert in, which is behavioral economics. And part of why he was such a brilliant economist was because he focused on human behavior. That's very important when it comes to investing. Very, very important. All that to say, Bill, when you're dealing with something as spiritually serious as biblically responsible investing, it would be far better for you to trust, number one, the Word of God, and number two, your own intellect.
your own God-given intellect and conscience, that's a far better tool for you than using any kind of robot, no matter how biased it might be, quote unquote. Hope that helps you out, Bill. It's a great question, and I do appreciate you bringing it up to us. My encouragement for you, if it's working for you, I think that's awesome. My encouragement for you would be trust first in the Word of God and your God-given intellect. So hope that helps, brother. I appreciate that so much. And I appreciate all of you, Sam as well. Thanks for sharing your insight there, brother. It was great to be here with you all today, folks. God willing, we will do it again tomorrow. Until then, remember, everything you have belongs to the Lord. Let's be found good and faithful stewards with what God has given to us. We'll see you next time.
If we ever forget that we're one nation under God, then we will be a nation gone under.
Thank you for joining us. This has been an FISM production.